Well, good afternoon. This is Jim Whitehead of All Power Group and Phoenix Animal and Power Coffee News. And today I'm wearing the Power Coffee News hat. And what we're going to, this is relatively short. You know, I have been a coffee roaster. My tale of never drinking coffee until about 6 years ago, shame on me, I get so interested and passionate about coffee that I said, I'm going to make my own coffee. And then I get to say, I want to do a coffee roasting business. So that's what we did. But today, what we're going to talk about, I'm going to show what I used, but the other choices. So the point is, you can see the title, your choices for coffee roasting machines for home or for your coffee business. And each category has where, there's small units for the home, and then you can progress to higher level of the amount of beans you can roast. That's kind of what you get into. Because when I show you, like one of them, for example, in fact, my first little roaster, it wouldn't be where you'd say, well, I can roast enough beans here to actually package and sell. And you can see, as I did in my business, in the middle of the page here, you can see, or the bottom of the page, you can see where and how I packaged my coffee to sell, and or in a lot of cases, because I was a generator company, I would give them as a thank you to my generator customers. So it was pretty cool. And all on the right of that is just and that's what I had back then. They get better every year, but that's a large commercial coffee grinder. And, when you talk about coffee grinding or why you do your own grinding, the aspect of having the best coffee you can, especially if you're roasting your own, is you don't roast them until you're going to use them. So every morning with my cup of coffee, my machine I use, and I have a hopper on the top of the unit. And I don't even have that pictured here, but bottom line, what it does is it kind of feeds out the correct amount of coffee beans that have been airtight. It grinds it down to in accordance to the type of coffee you're going to drink. Now, I do espresso, and I do a double. Now, if I was instead going to do let's say an Americano, everything would be a little bit different. The grind would be different. The quantity of the output might be different. Because with espresso, it's more of what you could say a concentrated example of liquid ground coffee. And the neatest thing, I drink it actually, believe it or not, I drink it cold. So, and you can drink it hot. And that's what's neat about coffee is if you don't like it this way, do it another way. So, anyway, here, let's talk about the machines here. Okay. This category of machines, on the left is what I would consider the home unit, and it's called a spin, and they've just come out with a spin 2. And on the right is what you would consider a much larger, same concept, but where you, let's say, have a coffee location, and you've got to make sure you can produce quite a few beans for your customers. Now, these are called centrifugal. Pretty good. And what they do is when they bring in the beans and they grind them, they spin them in the heat or the hot air. And that's one way of having where you won't burn the coffee because it's moving so quickly that it doesn't have an opportunity to sit and have some hot air blowing just on, one area of the beans. So it does a pretty good job. And I was very happy with the spin. The only thing is, and this is where if you use a coffee maker every day, sometimes they start to wear out. And I had this probably 4 or 5 years. So, I brought it over here, used it, but then it started to have some issues. Not anything wrong with spin. They have come out with what they call the Spin 2, and I like the original spin, so I'm sure the Spin 2 would be even better. But what happened is, I said I needed a new coffee maker, and the Spin 2 was not out yet. In fact, it just recently came out, and they sold all their first batch. So even if you said, well, I'm going to go to Spin, SPINN, you can order one, but I'm not exactly sure how quickly you'd get it. So, if you've got another coffee maker, it's fine. You want to try something different, certainly a good option. Now, if you progress into saying, hey, I like this concept, and I'm going to become a coffee roaster business, there's on the right is one option of equipment that would allow you to do the same centrifugal-oriented coffee roasting. Now, what you will find, the original spin was about $750. I don't even know what the price is on the larger centrifugal unit, but you're probably looking at 20 grand or even more. So, you kind of have to be careful not to say, hell, I get all this money, I don't care. You want to make sure you want to go to the right format that you're going to use for grinding and roasting. Roasting, actually, and then grinding, of course. You have good grinders. And I would, in my coffee business over on Davie, Florida, on the other side of the state, fortunately, I sold all my equipment, and you'll see my equipment in just a minute. And in essence, I just bought one that was large enough, and I'll show you the original one that was just kind of like a sample device. And then I bought a large unit that would allow me to literally do approximately 15 pounds an hour, and a rough range of time on it if you're roasting beans in more of a commercial need. You're looking at roast times, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, and it really just gets into the darkness of the roast. In other words, they have a light roast, and it's just like what it sounds like. The beans have progressed through the cycle, and I'm not necessarily going to get into that right now, but in essence, you have to make sure that, you get the light roast, the medium roast, and you'll see with a medium roast, it takes a little bit longer, a little bit more heat. And then if you go to a dark roast, you have to, of course, go longer and go to what we call a second crack. Don't worry, you won't be tested on that. And the biggest thing, and I would only do dark roasts if a customer asked for a dark roast. And I had one customer in particular. He'd say, the darker, the better. Now, here's where the problem is. Yes, you use computers, and I'll show you the computer setup I had for my roasting machine that I bought from Coffee Roasters. Good company. They make their own, made in the United States. So, do you have to pay tariffs? I don't think so. And I know, did we have to, back then when I bought these roasters, worry about if it's made somewhere else or some of the parts are made somewhere else, you're going to pay more. I mean, it doesn't, quite honestly, I don't want to get political, but it doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't. And you know, when they say, oh yeah, all this money is coming into the treasury of the government, well, it's, believe it or not, some of that money is our money because we go to the store and pay more for things because there's a tariff on them. Now, if that makes any sense, but that's all I'm going to say politically, because boy, I tell you, I could turn into. I don't want to, because it's, what's the point? But anyway, this is one type of roaster. Now, moving on. This kind of like, these are newer, what we call drum roasters. And if you go back 100 years or more or less, mainly they used what they called drum roasters. And contained within the round top area on both of these is a drum that is heated in most cases by either natural gas, typically natural gas, and the drum spins in accordance to how quickly you want it to spin. And the neatest thing with all of this equipment is you have so much control over the roast process. And I know somebody say, oh, I just want it roasted. I don't want to have to do anything. Well, the neatest thing is if you have any interest in learning, you can learn. And by the way, I just noticed in the picture on the left, that is running on a propane tank. Now, I was a gas contractor in my generator business. So I would I would install generators, but we would either do, and the generators would be the same. They had to be slightly converted internally, not a big option, not a big deal. But I could either run them on natural gas or propane. Now, again, you won't be tested on this, but on a scale of 1 to 6, and you have to look at when you've got a gas, the bang for the buck. Gasoline is a 6. Now, you don't use gasoline on any of this stuff. I would hate to tell you what would happen. But and this is true on the generator side, if you run a generator or your coffee maker on propane, that's again, a scale of 1 to 6. Propane's a 3. So it's got a little more BTU-oriented capabilities, so you're going to get a little better roasting in the sense of time. Natural gas is a 1. And so, as you would expect, it's not as efficient. And they used to have, and I don't mean to mix generators too much with my coffee, but they used to have it where, and I don't know why they dropped it, mainly because it might have confused people. But it would say, okay, if you're going to run this generator on propane, you're going to get 20 kW. Just keep that number in your head. And if you were going to run that same exact generator On natural gas, you might have only 18 kW. So the big point and why I brought that up, it just shows these gases, and again, you only use gasoline in a car, but in the generator business and the coffee business, we can use either propane or natural gas. And it wouldn't be where you'd say, oh, wow, I'm spending so much money, more money on using natural gas versus propane. It's just, how they're set up. And I'm not aware, if you say that's more than a grill tank that you're seeing, that's probably maybe a 20-pounder. They don't even sell containers that I'm aware of that are natural gas. They could, but there's almost no reason to, because you would be putting and selling a tank that just wouldn't be as efficient if it's natural gas versus propane instead. So anyway, these are drum roasters. Now, is there anything wrong with them? No. The one thing I don't like, and we get into convection heating or conduction heating. Now, the next area that we get into, and that's what I used and will use again, are units that do convection. And I'll explain convection when I'm showing you how these work. But on the drum roaster, you have a little bit of convection, how the heat is transferred to the beans that are being spun around. But conduction, and this is the one thing that makes it a little hard, and I'm not saying, people can make the best coffee in the world. So if you're good at what you do, you can use any roaster, learn the roaster, and put out great coffee of all different light, medium, dark, etc. The only thing I have, as the unit is spinning, the actual drum itself gets up to 400 degrees, 500 degrees, 450 degrees or less. But what happens is when the beans spin, you're moving them relatively quickly, but they still come back down right on that hot metal. So you really have to take that in consideration when you're using a drum roaster, that you're going to get some roasting from both the conduction and the convection. And the conduction, again, depending on the drum, how evenly the heat is put into that metal drum, it's interesting. So that's the only reason, and probably why I went to what I'm going to show you next. Okay, these are what we call fluid bed roasters. And let me show, I got to do something here. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't mean to mess things up, but we want to make sure you see what I'm doing here. Hold on, don't go anywhere. Hold on. Okay, I'm sorry again. Sometimes when you do these presentations, you go, I had this working fine, now it's not. Okay. On the left is what we call a Gene Cafe. And this was the very first roaster I had. And when they call it fluid bed, it's a little confusing. But what it's doing is it's putting hot air, and you can see the knobs at the bottom. The red one is the actual amount of heat you're putting into the air to roast the beans. And there's a temperature gauge right to the left of that. And then the blue knob is really the speed at which you turn these. Now, the funny thing, as I progressed in learning everything I could about coffee, with my first roast, luckily I had a big garage door open. I didn't know how long, I didn't know how much heat I needed to use. So what happened is I burnt the hell out of my first roast. Now, luckily, there aren't a lot of beans there. So you're not where you're saying, oh my God, I just lost 4 pounds of beans. No, that's probably 5 ounces, what have you. But it was like, you have to, and the point I'm making is every roaster is different. And even probably every Gene Cafe is a little bit different. So, this picture movie goes back to about 2018. I know they still make the Gene Cafe, but they probably have made it better. But as I started to say, my first roast, my wife comes running out of the house because we had with this building on our property, it was attached, but not, there was a garage in between. She all of a sudden, I guess was in the kitchen of the main house, and she started smelling something burning. And yeah, of course, I'm not stupid. Sometimes I am, but I was like, uh-oh, I got to stop this. Well, she came out, she said, what the heck's burning? I said, well, honey, my very first roast got over roasted. And, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, if you like to do a dark roast, you get you got within seconds of getting it to the darkest you can get and still have the beans are good, and go another 30 seconds, 25 seconds, and you start to burn them. And the coffee is it's burnt, and it's just not going to make you happy. Now, on the right is what I bought from Coffee Masters as I progressed and said, I really, really want to have a coffee business. And that's a fluid bed also. And what's neat about that, and I'll show you as they have come out with a newer unit that I probably, if I'm able to go back into the business, I would be getting one of their units. What this does is, besides heating the air, and you have the knobs on the right is for the heat, on the left is the amount of air you put into the bottom of that chrome looking unit, and that lofts the beans so that this hot air coming up, and the beans are rotating, moving around, and you can have it higher, lower, and the rule of thumb was lofted up to about the middle of the window, and you've got a light on there, so and you can see the color. And I would be able to roast one right after the other and do about 20 pounds an hour. Now, on the lower left, there's a computer that is out of the screen, but on the lower left, those are temperature thermometers in essence. And what I'm monitoring is the room air. And somebody said, well, why do you have to do that? Well, believe it or not, if you're in a room that's 85 degrees or 75 degrees, you got to take that into consideration when you're roasting beans, because that's, another heat source. You have to be careful. So room temperature. I also had a setting, and it would show on the machine itself how hot the machine was getting with internally below what is sticking up where the beans loft. And typically that would get into 500 degrees when you're progressing into the roast. I also would measure my the exhaust temperature, because the hood that you see on the top there, that is going up, the air and the heat and anything that's coming off the coffee beans, it gets pulled up, vacuumed up, and pulled out, and it goes in and kind of make sure the coffee is neat and clean when you're ready to do what we call pull the roast. And so I monitored 4 different temperatures, and you would see it on the screen. And if you say, well, I'm happy with this roast, you can save that roast, in the sense of the temperatures and the rate of rise of the temperature, et cetera, and you can keep doing that roast. If, let's say, it's a medium roast, if you have a profile for a dark roast, that's another point of keeping track, or a light roast. So, and what you can tell and it's kind of simple in a way. A light roast, the beans are relatively light brown, if I can say it that way. Medium, a little bit darker, and dark are dark. And you can see on the left side that my beans right now, they're a little more than medium roast. And as we progress, they go into a dark roast. And I should have pulled them, and I didn't, and they went into a burn roast, if I could say it that way. All right, moving on. All right, there you can see on the left, that's the same machine, just showing you how I'm lofting the beans, and you can see the probe coming down, and that tells me the temperature of the beans. So I know darn well, by the way, what you're looking at now, that's what you have to put the beans in immediately upon finishing the roast, and you have to put it in a cooling system that pushes tons of cool air up through the bottom of that. Because what happens when you roast coffee, if you take them out and stop the roast, and you just put them in that tray, and you don't immediately have cool air running through those beans to cool them down immediately, you will do some addition. Believe it or not, because of the heat, you will roast the beans a little bit more. And you don't want to do that. You pull the roast when you feel it's either light, medium, and dark. And we can go on, and there's probably 20 different descriptions of all light, medium, and dark. Now, you're probably saying, why is that microphone there? Well, I'm glad you asked. See, again, that goes in and goes into a tray that's way on the lower right. In addition to my blower, it puts air right through and up through that tray, and really cools the beans down in about 15, 20 seconds, give or take, depending on the amount of beans. Now, the reason why I put a microphone, because, there's noise. The actual blower is a little noisy. When you're roasting coffee, you have 2 events besides the beans turning a different color, but you have 2 other events that you have to be mindful and hear. And of course, as you get older, I'm not a youngster anymore, I don't think. I don't hear as well. When you're roasting the beans, when you would get them up to about 380, 390, 400, you would go into what we call first crack. Now, what does that mean? It's when the beans start to open up, release moisture, and at that point, you're pretty much at a medium roast level. Now, again, it sounds like popcorn popping in essence, but that's first cracking. By the way, if you can see it, is what's going up as these beans are lofting is what we call chaff. That's material that's around the beans that has to be removed, and as they heat up, it gets popped off, pulled off, and it gets blown up, and you can see that's all chaff that's going up. Now, obviously, if I put the air control for the lofting too much, I'll end up pushing beans out, and they're gone. I mean, so you have to be very careful to keep them the way it is. Now, so I would use where I could I'd wear headphones, and I would have it where I knew first crack, and of course I would look at my computer system, and I'd say, okay, there's first crack. Okay, let's go another X few minutes and few more degrees up, and then we shut everything down, pour them into the tray, and cool them right down. Now on the right side, that's one of the 5 or so new Coffee Crafter fluid bed roasters, and they were so good at supporting me setting my roastery up and all the things I needed to know, and shipping and so on and so forth, and a lot of video training. So it's really, if you're interested and you want to do this, there's so many resources to make sure you're going to do a good job over time. So this unit and what they've done, they do have one which I didn't put on the presentation, but they have a smaller unit that would be comparable. It's another Valenta unit, but it's comparable to my unit on the left. So, and of course, the larger you go, the more beans you can roast at the same time, but of course the price goes up. So you have to really gauge and think, how serious am I in turning this into a full-fledged money-making roaster business? Now, since I stopped roasting, because I've been over here 2.5 years, and that's when we shut down, I was pleasantly surprised to find that these are, and I really didn't go very much more into it other than seeing the type. These are, and they're just different colors. They're the same unit, black and white. These are solar coffee roasters. Now, what does that mean? Well, one, they're electric versus gas. And again, we can go back and forth on what is the best solution on roasting beans. I like the fluid bed, etc., etc. But just as a last slide here before we end, is these run on solar power. Now, I used to run the building I'm in on solar power to learn some of the aspects of solar power and battery systems, EcoFlow, for example. So, and the neatest thing that you have with the way batteries are today, the lithium ion, and now I've got I think they're sodium ion batteries that are just coming out. they last a long time. They can be charged multiple times, meaning, and what I would do every day, I'd run this building, and at about 5 o'clock, I'd be starting at 90% of my battery power. And again, the power is just normal power. It's 120, 240, so it isn't anything different. It's just, it's not unlimited. So I would keep an eye on it, depending on the lights I have on, air conditioning, and so on and so forth. And keep an eye on the percentage to ensure, and I only had it happen once when the building just shut down. Because when they go down to about 20%, they don't want to go all the way down to zero. And you can choose what percent you want it to stop. But it went down to 20, and all of a sudden I'm sitting in the dark. So, it's like whatever, getting to know your equipment. I moved that equipment. I mean, this building now runs on regular FPL electric power, but we moved our EcoFlow systems into the garage and integrated it into our home electrical system for power losses. And it works great. And it's very stable, very accurate, because not that you're going to be tested on electricity, but you have to be very careful on any way of how you bring electricity to make sure that it's putting out the right power level. And we, in essence, call the power on like televisions run on what we call 120. I know some people say 110, 220. That's not the right verbiage, really. The 110 is really 120, and that's volts. So that's the measurement that we use for equipment, both volts and amps. So anyway, the other, where you combine, and the homes have, in essence, I know I go under a lot of additional information, but it has where what comes into your home, into your electric meter, besides grounds and what we call a neutral, I won't even get into that, but it has two 120 lines. So some of your things run on 120, one of the 120 lines, some run on the other 120 line. But some things, like air conditioners, not like the air conditioner I have cooling me now is a 120 unit, but a standard 4-ton, 3-ton, etc. that you use for your home, that's outside, that's 240. So it needs both those lines, 120, 240. It's just has to happen. And if you, and this can happen, you can put too much power into, let's say, you don't have 120, you have 140 and 100. Bad. Because that means whatever's running on that 100 is underpowered, which isn't good. But the other line, if it's not 140, you're putting in too much power, and some things will literally blow up, like TVs, power strips, you name it. So there's no fooling around with saying, hey, I want a little more power. I want, no, it's got to be accurate. And it's just one little aside that's good. As you go out, look at your electric meter. One, that will tell you whether you've lost power. Sometimes I have to go out. If we lose power, it could be us. It could be something internally. But you go out, if the meter is blank, in so many words, you've lost your electrical in this case, FPL Power. And what's really even more important is as the little LED or LCD window, it has different readouts. And about every 5 to 6 seconds, it will put out a number that should be in the range of 240. It could be 235, it could be 242, 245. That's okay, but the exact number should be 240. And that means it's coming in balanced and you're supplying the proper power to the home. Okay, I wish there were some questions, but anyway, here he is again, just showing you. By the way, I did, and I'm not doing this as a commercial, but I love doing coffee so much that I wrote a book. And as you see up in the upper right, it says "Journey Through the World of Coffee." I'm sorry. Acquire green beans, and that's how coffee comes when you buy it. They're green. When you put them in a roaster, they're green, and as you heat them up, they turn, and you can smell also coffee roasting. It's a wonderful smell, especially when it first starts to really roast the beans. It smells great. It really does. And if you over roast it, you will know that too. Not by just looking at the beans, but you'll either see smoke and smell burning. So anyway, that's all I have for today. We have spoken. How long have we spoken here? 41 minutes. I'm sorry. I don't mean to do that. But when I know I always can talk a lot, I guess. When I watch things, because I learn everything on YouTube also, as you might, things you're interested in, you get to where you want to basically do everything right and have it where you learn from this. And please, the biggest thing I ask customers or subscribers, ask me any questions. I can speak to people by phone, email, leave, a comment on my video. What do you need to know? I love to teach. I love to share with people because, especially, I'm going to be honest, we recognize, and again, that the government just shut down last night, and not that one would say, oh, gee, I don't have income coming in right now. It's not that you can say, well, I can have a business, coffee business up and running in, 3 days. No, you can't. That said, though, if depending on what I end up doing, I do want to roast my own beans. That's the most fun part of the whole process, and then sell them and make a little money. You can, and I've spoken to a couple local roasters here in Naples, and I could, and they call it white label, where I could say, okay, I want X number of pound bags of medium roast coffee, and when they say it's a white label, they don't label it with their name and yada, 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 yada. I would then label it as you see in the middle picture. Those are pound bags, and I would print out the labels. And of course, I did the thank you notes. And the label would tell you everything you wanted to know, where that coffee came from. And I had a very big preference toward Ethiopia. Yirgacheffe. They, and still are, one of the best coffees out there. But you get them all over the world. Brazil, Vietnam, Sumatra, just about anywhere that is in what we call the bean belt. And the bean belt goes around the middle of the earth, the equator, and it goes up a certain amount of miles above, miles below, and that is in the coffee roasting area. Florida, for example, because we have such hot temperatures in the summer, and even more, we start having hot weather in May, and it's just, as you know, today's October 1st, and it's probably 88, 90 degrees. So in other words, the point I'm making, you wouldn't really be able to grow coffee in South Florida. It's done, I guess, but it doesn't usually have it where it works for you. Now, just two examples of wonderful coffee is Kona. Now, Kona coffee is grown on Hawaii. And there's altitude issues. I've done another presentation on the coffee belt and what's happening with climate change. But Kona coffee is grown at about 5,000 feet on Hawaii. And obviously, not all of the Hawaiian Islands are 5,000 feet. So, in other words, there isn't areas that fit that description of 5,000, 6,000 feet. And that's where they grow their coffee. And, in Florida, we're flat, and flat. And we're hot, and hot. I mean, they've even tried to do, wine, grapes. It's done, but it's really, really tough because again, we have gone up. In other words, every year from 2014, so now it's over 10 years, every summer since beginning in 2014 summer is hotter than the summer before. So 2015 was hotter, 16 was hotter. So even if back then it made sense to do any of this in the sense of outside growing coffee, we've gone 10, 11 years. And probably in the sense of probably 15 to 20 degrees hotter. So if it worked in 2014, which it really wouldn't, but if it did in what we are in today, it wouldn't work either. But I want to thank you. I know I talk a lot, talk too much sometimes, but I hope and my goal is to really help with any teaching, things you want to know. Now, what I started to say earlier, because this presentation now is 48 minutes, the point would be that if something's long, you don't want to automatically just say, "Oh, I'm not gonna. I don't have the time to watch that." The neat thing about YouTube is you can watch part of it and go back to it. So it isn't where you have to, oh my heaven, I got to spend all this time and I don't have the time now. No, watch 10 minutes now, come back, and you can even skip to the end. It's like that's what's neat about YouTube. I have a lot of choices. You have a lot of choices. So anyway, thank you very, very much. And I really hope, I know we're going through times, because I've been, a U.S. citizen since 1949. And yeah, I've seen a lot of changes, and certainly there's some changes going on right now that kind of does scare everybody. And I just wish everybody the best. And thank you again for being here. And please comment, leave any questions. I would love to answer. If you want to say it's terrible, you talk too much, you're old. Yeah, this gray hair looks white. It's because I'm Jim Whitehead. When I was not Whitehead, I was anyway, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be stupid. But anyway, thank you again for being here. And hopefully I'll see you again. Thank you very much.